She was like a Hollywood star. She was perfect, flawless, and there was almost a sort of aura of goldenness around her.
Diana would have celebrated her 40th birthday this year. For most of us, life is supposed to begin at 40. But for Diana, her life was cut short. Too soon for most, too late for a few. Fairy tales are supposed to have happy endings. The Honourable Diana Frances Spencer was born on the 1st of July, 1961. She was an immediate disappointment to her parents.
There are several preoccupations that mar the existence of any British noble family. You're always worried about appearances, you're always worried about money, of not selling off any land, and above all else, you must produce male heirs.
With 2 daughters already, tensions rose between Johnny Spencer and his young wife Frances when Diana turned out not to be a David.
I think Diana's witnessing of her parents' perpetual rows, arguments, anger, they were both volatile characters, Frances and Johnny, and I think that it is fairly evident that the children were witness to the many rows that went on between the couple.
3 years later, a boy was born. Duty was done. The Spencer line secured, the marriage fell apart. Diana, aged 6, saw her mother storm out of the house and her father hit the bottle. Her brother Charles, the heir, became the focus, and her elder sisters were dispatched to boarding school. Diana blamed herself for the breakup of the family. If only she had been a boy.
Well, right away, it would have had a very powerful impact. I think there's about 3 years differential between her and Charles in terms of age. And so she grew up, the formative years, her very early years, she was reminded constantly, probably subconsciously, there was always that kind of feeling I'm sure she got, that she wasn't the right sex, the right gender.
In the bitter custody battle that followed, Diana's mother was betrayed by her own mother, Diana's grandmother.
Ruth Lady Fermoy, the Queen Mother's best friend, testified against her own daughter apropos of custody of the children because she was such a snob that she wanted these children brought up in the Earl part of the family rather than her own part of the family, unbelievably.
In 1971, Diana followed her sisters to Westheath boarding school. If life at home had been unbearable without her mother, at least at school, Diana was happy. The academic side never interested her, but she was an excellent swimmer and a gifted pianist. Diana spent most of her time reading Barbara Cartland novels and disappearing into a world of make-believe.
There are all these stories told that Diana said she was going to be a princess one day or said she was going to marry somebody significant. I think all teenage girls have such dreams.
At school, the first signs of Diana's distress over her parents' marriage failure began to surface.
The fact that Diana started her symptoms of bulimia when she went to boarding school is also actually quite telling, because people who develop symptoms of bulimia tend to come from very troubled backgrounds, usually rife with divorce or some other kind of conflict, and they use bulimia as a way of sort of developing their self-esteem. This is a way that they feel that they can develop their self-esteem and also to overcome difficulties with painful emotions.
Diana's troubled emotional state was made worse in 1975 when her grandfather died. Her father, Johnny, became the 8th Earl Spencer. He was now a wealthy, titled man, and, divorced, a prize catch. It was Rain, Countess of Dartmouth, mother of 4, and daughter of Diana's favorite author Barbara Cartland, who hooked him. The young Diana hated her.
She was a wonderful example of the wicked stepmother. She moves in, she adores Johnny, or shall we say she at least adores his position and his title, and she is absolutely determined to make him hers, even if that means alienating the children.
They all used to sing together, "Rain, rain, go away, never come back another day." So they obviously didn't get on with her at all, and they thought that what she had done, she had interposed between the father and their relationships with him.
After West Heath, and not wanting to be at home with Acid Rain, her stepmother, Diana moved in with her sister Sarah in London. Initially, there was friction as the young sister cramped Sarah's style. Flatmate Lucinda Craig Harvey observed, "Diana hero-worshipped Sarah, but she treated her like a doormat." After a while, however, there was a realization that Diana might have a future.
I think there certainly was jealousy on behalf of those two sisters, but at the same time, they were looking for a dynastic alliance. They desperately wanted to see whether they couldn't get Diana alongside Prince Charles.
Diana's sister Sarah had a brief relationship with Prince Charles. It had not been a success, but maybe they could catch him with their younger sister.
They knew that Diana was absolutely the right girl in the right place at the right time, and so they pushed her forward.
Diana had met Charles many times as a child, but it was at a party given by the de Passes in July 1980 where Charles was reintroduced to the now 19-years-old Diana.
I think that it was a little bit more than coincidence, but not totally prearranged, so somewhere between half and half. But the de Passes were great friends of Prince Philip's, and I think that they thought it would be nice for Diana to meet Charles and Charles to meet Diana.
Charles, 31, had recently bought Highgrove as if symbolically saying to the world's women he was ready to settle.
He'd always said, "Oh, I don't think I should get married before I'm 30. So once he turned 30, the heat was on. He had to find a wife. And when Diana came along, she was so perfect in every way, so it seemed.
There were restrictions on his choice by antique, outrageous statutes. He couldn't marry outside the Protestant faith, etc. He couldn't marry, as custom and habit had it at the time, a girl with what was called a past. In fact, Diana's uncle gave a press conference to prove that she was a virgin, which was one of the most extraordinary events I've ever attended.
I think the fact that Diana had had very few boyfriends, and there was very little that the press could dig up about her, was certainly in her favour. And she came from the right sort of class, if you like.
Charles was attracted, and they started dating. Diana's family was thrilled. When Diana joined Charles at a concert at the Royal Albert Hall, her chaperone for the evening was her grandmother, Ruth, Lady Fermoy.
Ruth, Lady Fermoy, must have sat in the car and thought that she was the cat who had the cream. But now, at long last, she was going further and further up the hierarchy, and her granddaughter was going to be the future Queen of England. Wonderful.
The relationship developed, and, as with most inquisitive girls, Diana asked Charles about his previous girlfriends. She heard a name that would come to haunt her for the rest of her life.
He sort of told her that Camilla was the one that he'd really cared about, and this festered in her mind. And he should never have told her that. So this Camilla bubble started to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and I think she just blew it out of all proportion.
The difficulty with Charles was that really after he had gone to bed with and fallen in love with Camilla, all other women seemed a rather pale imitation.
Most in the palace considered Camilla ideal mistress material, but no more. But this was not an issue, as it was normal practice for a prince to have a mistress or two. Edward VII, Charles' great-great-grandfather, had set the precedent. He had an affair with, among others, Alice Keppel, Camilla's grandmother. As love blossomed, pressure increased on Charles to make a decision. The nation had found its fairy tale princess, and Diana had found her Prince Charming. Charles really had little choice.
Charles had been put under tremendous pressure, principally by Prince Philip, and several courtiers as well, who were suggesting that, you know, it was about time he got married and produced an heir.
Charles hesitated. He turned to the only woman who really understood him for advice, Camilla. She thought Diana posed no threat to her and Charles.
Camilla made the biggest mistake of her life. She described Diana as the mouse. She absolutely did not see Diana Spencer coming. She hadn't got a clue as to the formidable foe that she had taken on.
And Camilla was not alone. Everyone underestimated the mouse.
The intriguing thing about the Diana story is the way that this gawky, uncertain, shy nursery school teacher becomes the leading media celebrity of the age and knows she is as well and is prepared to use that power. It's almost like Frankenstein's beauty.
By the same token, Diana underestimated the hold Camilla had on Charles. Diana saw in Charles the opportunity to build the happy family she had been deprived of as a child. She was not going to let this opportunity go. Charles' valet, Stephen Barry, commented, "In all my years, I've never seen anyone as tricky or as determined as she was."
Well, when Princess Diana first laid eyes on Prince Charles, right away she projected onto him this fantasy figure of the rich, wealthy person who is going to whisk her away and rescue her from her family situation. And this is something that Diana had in her mind, her fantasy.
The press pushed for Diana too. Diana sold newspapers.
When the media did realise that there may be something going on between the two of them, of course, I mean, all hell broke loose.
To escape the photographers, Diana once clambered down some knotted sheets at the back of her flat to sneak off to see Charles. The thrill of the chase.
When you are sharing a danger like that, an excitement like that, that can bring two people together. So in some ways, the media hunt of them brought Charles and Diana together.
The chase also nearly drove them apart. On the 5th of November 1980, the Mirror reported that a woman was seen joining the prince on the royal train parked in sidings overnight. The paper claimed it was Diana. Diana knew otherwise, but said nothing.
There was Prince Charming, the man who's going to be the King of England. From her point of view, it must have been easy to have convinced herself that she was in love. From Prince Charles's point of view, he had this shy, beautiful youngster who all the media had immediately fallen in love with. From his point of view, she was a catch as well.
Diana may have had the right qualities to be a future queen, but she and Charles really had little in common.
The problem was that Prince Charles was Radio 4 and she was Radio 1, and they stayed that way. I mean, the tragedy of it all is that she was the perfect girl for us, but she was not the perfect girl for Charles.
It took 6 months for Diana to net her catch. On the 6th of February 1981, Charles proposed and Diana happily accepted. The next day, Diana moved to Clarence House and had her first taste of things to come. No welcome with open arms, just a nod from a rather curt official. It was like walking into a hotel, Diana said later.
What people did not know is that 2 days after she moved into the Queen Mother, she moved from there to Buckingham Palace and took rooms next to Charles's rooms. I have it on the absolute first-hand account that 6 months of their relationship was fantastic. They were totally together the whole time.
Then, on Tuesday the 24th of February 1981, they told the world they were engaged. Charles fluffed his lines.
When Charles famously said whatever love means in the engagement interview, the irony, of course, we now know is that he did know perfectly well because he was in love with Camilla Parker Bowles.
With the formalities addressed, Charles went back to work, leaving Diana to tackle the media. She was a natural. Diana mania took off. At a gala for the Royal Opera House, Diana wore a black silk taffeta strapless gown with a plunging décolletage. Charles was almost speechless.
He got out of the car and he said to all the pressmen gathered there, "You'll never guess what's coming next." He was so proud of her. He thought she looked amazing.
In one simple act, Diana leapt from naive little girl to glamorous superstar.
No one estimated that Diana would turn from the gawky, shy little duckling into this fantastic swan. Diana, at this early stage, was really an innocent. She was an innocent abroad. She didn't know it, but she, in fact, was the bait being thrown to the sharks.
Just before the wedding, Camilla took Diana to lunch. Camilla gushed over the engagement ring and quizzed Diana over whether she would hunt. When Diana said no, Camilla smiled. She and Charles would still be able to meet.
Diana hoped that in the run-up to the marriage that her overwhelming love for Prince Charles would provoke him to dispatch Camilla Parker Bowles into oblivion. But as the months went by and this did not happen, the doubts must have gradually grown in her own mind. She realised too the enormity of the role, the position she was taking on.
Then, just 5 days before the wedding, Diana found some jewellery. A bracelet with a blue enamelled disc with the letters F and G entwined. Fred and Gladys, the nicknames she knew Charles and Camilla called themselves. It was a gift for Camilla. Diana exploded with rage. Charles looked on, shocked.
Nothing in his upbringing had prepared him for having to face somebody who had become hysterical. And his attitude towards that kind of behaviour was really to turn his back on it. He just shut down.
Angry and stressed, Diana wondered whether she could go through with the wedding.
She had doubts, and she once said to her sister Sarah, I really need now, I want to pull out, I want to scrap the engagement. And Sarah replied, "It's too late, Dutch," which was the nickname, "your face is on the tea towels."
And so on the 29th of July 1981, the fairy tale became reality in front of 700 million people. As Diana walked down the aisle at St. Paul's, she saw Camilla.
She was looking out to see where she was, to see what she was looking like. And she had in her eye a gleam of victory. I'm married to Charles, you're not.
All the royals standing there as they processed down the aisle knew that this man was in love with another woman who was also standing there in the congregation. And Diana told us how she noticed Camilla and her son as she went by and thought, well, that's all over.
And after the wedding came the first real opportunity for Diana to be alone with her husband.
I think Charles realised on the honeymoon that he had made the biggest mistake of his life. Diana was overwrought by, and understandably so, by all the pressure and attention which had been given to her. Now she was alone with this man who was considerably older than her.
They spent a lot of time sunbathing, reading, and just being in each other's company. Diana tells a slightly different story. She said she was already in the huge grips of bulimia and was rushing down to the wardroom to get buckets of ice cream. And she says that Prince Charles read a lot and didn't pay enough attention to her. So we already got sort of kind of differing stories here.
It was on board Britannia where 2 photos of Camilla fell out of Charles's diary. Diana demanded the truth, but Charles did not respond. Diana took his silence as an admission of guilt.
Charles saw Diana as a blank page to be written on precisely as he wanted to. He had no intentions whatsoever of forfeiting his relationship with Camilla, so what he wanted was a beautiful, shy young bride who would do his bidding, produce children and turn the other way.
She turned out to be a woman of her generation who was not going to put up with her husband having a mistress, and it drove her off the rails.
One of the most intriguing things about the Diana story is to watch her slowly realise and become aware of the effect that she's having on other people. Look at her dress, look at her costumes. They start to become more adventurous, they start to become more exciting, more charismatic.
The palace had never experienced anything like the Diana phenomenon before. Diana overshadowed everything and everyone, and she knew it.
Charles had spent a lifetime shaking hands with people, and there was a sort of blank wall between him and the people he was shaking hands with. But with Diana, this was all new. This was very exciting to go out and meet people, and of course, there was a sort of rush of adrenaline every time she stepped out of a car. The Union Jacks would wave, people would scream and shout, and for a girl who was barely 20, this was a tremendous drug.
For all his life, Charles had been number one, feted and cheered wherever he went. Now the public groaned when he went to their side of the street.
Charles bitterly resented Diana's public appeal. She would be out with the crowd, they would adore her, they would absolutely scream and shout for her. And it would take a saint not to feel resentful that she was getting this kind of acclaim while he himself was being virtually ignored.
Public adoration hit new heights in November '82, when the nation was told Diana was pregnant. But it wasn't to be a happy 9 months.
Diana was conscious by now that Charles was seeing Camilla, talking to Camilla, that there was a conspiracy going on, and this really is what I think that Diana hated more than anything.
He was the one who was going to save her. This was going to be the happy ever after fairy tale of all the romance novels that she was reading. So for her to find out that Prince Charles was having an affair with Camilla is another earth-shattering blow to this illusion, this fantasy that she really held for herself.
Then, on the 20th of June 1982, with Charles by her side, Diana gave birth to a 7.5-pound boy, the future King of England. The Queen's first comment was, "Thank goodness he hasn't got ears like his father."
They were, both of them, absolutely delighted with the birth of Prince William. From Diana's point of view, it cemented the relationship, she thought, because that was something that Camilla could never give Charles. From Charles's point of view, he had done his duty, but he has always been very fond of Prince William and later on Prince Harry as well.
The baby William was to see little of his parents as they continued with their punishing schedule of public duties. In March '83, a 5-week tour to Australia was a huge success for Diana.
She had become a megastar, bigger than any film star in the world, bigger than any other monarch in the world.
The palace was scared of Diana. They were appalled at the world reaction to her, that every magazine from London to Timbuktu was covered with her photograph. There was nothing that they could do to stop this extraordinary forest fire of publicity.
In Australia, Diana had Charles to herself and she was happy. Back home, though, Diana had less of a hold over her husband.
She really went to pieces, and she was finding it very, very difficult to cope. Charles couldn't handle it. Charles couldn't cope with her. He didn't know where to turn, what to do.
Charles, of course, turned to Camilla and the offer of a sympathetic ear and a warm bed.